I've been representing brain injured people for probably 15 years now. It started as one case and then 2 cases. And I had one particularly challenging case in probably 1993 where it was clear from talking to my client, even clearer from talking to his wife, that he was significantly impaired by the injury. Yet the doctors who were treating him were basically saying that he should have had a full recovery. It was a good-sized case, there was a deep pocket, there was a good chance of collecting a substantial sum if we were successful. So I just wasn't satisfied with the explanation I was getting. And there was a seminar offered in Houston on brain injury. And I just felt I needed to know more about brain injury to properly represent this individual. So I got on an airplane, went down to Houston, and spent 3 days just absorbing more information about brain injury than I had ever imagined. And for some reason, it clicked for me. Since then, I have basically tried to limit my practice to brain injury. And it took me several years to transition from what, frankly, was a small-town general practice lawyer into being a brain injury advocate and now a full-time personal injury lawyer representing only people with brain injuries. When I first started working with brain injury, we were taught by the best doctors in the country that there were certain myths that people had about brain injury, that the first thing you had to do was overcome these myths. And the first myth, and the most common one, I suppose, is that you have to have a loss of consciousness to have a brain injury. The second one, probably almost as common, was that if an MRI or a CT scan is normal, you don't have a brain injury. And probably the third one that was probably just as significant is if you didn't hit your head, you couldn't have a brain injury. These issues are talked about at length throughout subtlebraininjury.com, at length throughout tbilaw.com. There are clear explanations of why it is that this litmus test of having a loss of consciousness has nothing to do with the diagnosis of the severity of an injury. There's substantial information about how it is that the brain can be injured even if there's no direct blow to the head, that the forward and back violent motion that occurs in a whiplash type injury is sufficient to jam the inside of is sufficient to jam the brain into the very hard surfaces of the skull or the very sharp surfaces on the underside of the skull. What's the biggest change that's occurred in that 12 or 15 years since I started doing this on a substantial and now full-time basis is that the MRI technology has substantially improved. A brain injury involves injury to microscopic portions of our bodies. The nerve cells, the neurons that are injured in the brain are 100,000 of them have to be injured in the same place to actually have enough to start to show up on an MRI scan. But in the last couple of years, the MRI has gone from the capacity to see virtually no permanent brain injury that involved the type of concussions, subtle brain injury symptoms that so many of my clients have, to now we are getting as much as 50% of those people, we are starting to show some markers of the brain injury. We're not actually seeing all the brain damage, but we are starting to see the markers. That is probably the most exciting thing that's happened in my career in the last 5 years. I remember the actualization of the event when I had a client who had been diagnosed with a brain injury. She had a vestibular disorder. It was clear that it all had happened, but the early MRIs, what they call a 1.5 Tesla MRI, had been normal. And when the new generation of technology became available in 2004, and we sent this client to be scanned, and the MRI came back not just showing evidence of brain damage, but evidence of brain damage in the exact places that the treating doctors had said it was there before they had the MRI. I remember it was like eureka. It was this wonderful event. Our current MRI technology is still only showing us the tip of the iceberg. The 3 Tesla magnet can now see things that are concentrations of damage as small as 1 millimeter, where the previous generation was probably more like 2 millimeters. 1 millimeter is a huge amount of brain tissue when you're talking about damage. Yet that ability to use an imaging tool to show us even that much brain injury, that is truly a wonderful breakthrough, and one that makes us all very eager for the next generation of scanners that'll show us even more.